So an already unrehearsed presentation has been put out of order, so this could be quite interesting now. So essentially, I've been asked to say a few words about the project origins, particularly from the gallery's point of view. Live at LICA only came together in 2009 through a merger process. Predominantly, we were working at the time with contemporary art, performance, theatre, dance, music, and we happened to acquire a collection in all of this as well. And so whilst we were working out who we were as an organisation, we were also really interested to open up the collection. So one, we could understand it, but also our audiences could too. Thank you. So the approach we took to this initially was a curatorial project called Conversations with the Collection, where we actually gave access to different groups of people over a 3-year period to the collection. And rather than just saying curate an exhibition, we asked them to look at the collection and then try and find a response or find a work that resonated with them in some way. So we went through a series of exhibitions that were with artists, with support staff that we work with more directly in a slightly more political way. And then in 2012, the images you can see here result of a year-long process with 4 schools, a whole load of students who have been mentored by an artist and various other relationships. And this was really successful, actually. And we were, at that point, really interested in how we could continue that work. So we started thinking about, well, how can you extend that project? We want to make our collections more accessible. How can we raise awareness of them, an understanding of them, and do that in a remote way? How can our audiences continue to curate our collections, but do that in a remote way and create new context for the collection? We wanted to allow people to exhibit, share, and comment on the collections. But I suppose also what can we learn about our audiences through their choices? And we were particularly interested after this project in how we could allow teachers to grow their confidence and use some kind of tool that would access the collections and to be some kind of discussion tool within the classroom. Perhaps most importantly, though, for us, it was about taking the collections to new places and it actually being a meaningful experience. And I suppose on top of that, because some of the other slides talk about this, but on top of that, by making this research or by making this kind of thinking free and available to others, can we collectively, and when I say that I mean museums and galleries, particularly smaller museums and galleries, can we get past funding restraints, and particularly the current climate, to give access to this kind of technology? So Peter Scott Gallery is actually a very small gallery within an interdisciplinary arts organisation. And so we saw, I particularly see this project as an opportunity to kind of create something that can then be shared across the museum and art gallery community. So, next slide, I'll use this. There we go. So very briefly, I just thought I'd talk a little bit about, I've talked about some of the accessibility and aims and aspirations of the project, but we also hoped to talk a little bit about some of the challenges. So we spent a lot of time as a gallery dealing with some of the sort of more pragmatic things and the challenges. So everything from incomplete collections databases to trying to manage the workload of the staff against other projects, image management. So some of the images we've been working with to get the right kind of detail for some of the things Paul just briefly mentioned were too big for the software that we were working with at the time. So that's something that we can hopefully take back to the industry. We wanted to work a lot with artists and copyright associations because obviously artwork comes with a whole load of issues. So we've been speaking with artists directly as individuals who've been making suggestions about what should go in the terms and conditions when people start using the app, to people who want to manipulate and watermark their own images so we don't even have full control over exactly what we're going to be using, to speaking to people like the Design and Artist Copyright Society who'd never dealt with this before. So we're actually challenging them to think about their working processes. So they went away and had to think about it and came back with some prices based on that. And Paul's mentioned where do you hold images for security? You know, is it on the device or is it in the cloud? But I suppose one of the things that I wanted to bring up was thinking about how artists try and understand what we're dealing with. And the image you can see is by an artist called Albert Irvin. And interestingly, when this image was dropped into Keynote, it actually cropped it, which wasn't intentional. But one of the conversations I had with Albert was, well, can people see the image in its entirety when it's on the app? And I was trying to explain, well, it depends on the viewer's point of view. It's kind of a dynamic thing where it's like being in a space. You know, you view it and you get the room that you're in and the perspective and everything else. So having added the credit line to this and everything else that we'd agreed, it's now appeared in this room with none of those things and not in its entirety. So I've noticed cameras. So for everyone in the room, just in case this ends up on the internet or anywhere else, this is Albert Irving's work, Thames. And I'm sorry, Albert. I think at this point it's probably better I hand over to Paul, but as a bit of a kind of segue, the point we reached there after thinking about all of these things was augmented reality. What is it and how can we use it for this purpose? So.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to come out on the design and the technical aspects, and I guess we were coming from this idea of what's the most advanced thing to do, because that would be cool, but yet what's acceptable, and both acceptable to the user but also acceptable to the gallery, because and the artist in terms of the work. So I've shown the video. I thought in terms of the design and the technical thing, I could tell you specifically how we did it, but I guess I felt it was more important to say, what are the choices that you have to make with augmented reality? What is it and how does it work? So augmented reality fits in this thing from the real to the virtual, and it's a specific point in space. So augmented reality means we take virtual objects and we overlay them on a real world video scene usually. Augmented virtuality is you take a real object and you put it in a virtual world, which is often used by sort of doctors' simulators where you put an object in that space. So we're working at this augmented reality, and it spatially combines real and the virtual in real time. And the spatial thing is really important because it has to know where it's looking. So when you see captions over a football match, that's not augmented reality, that's just an overlay. If it's not done in real time for movies, so Gollum is not augmented reality, it's rendered offline. So it has to work when the user moves it, and it has to happen in things. So that's augmented reality. In terms of mobile, you've got a couple of choices at the moment. You can either go wearable, which used to be like these giant helmets you used to wear, which are great, and you had a backpack full of technology, you look ridiculous. So now we're moving to things like Google Glass and Oculus Rift. So you can actually make it more wearable, and these are often called more immersive because it's always in vision. The phone is a more often called the magic lens approach, where you've got a magic thing you look through and see it. So those are your things. If you want to do more people, then the phone's the obvious option, but that may well change in a year or two. In terms of what you have to do is that you get a frame from the camera, video, you have to know where this camera is in space, so I have to know I'm looking at this screen. I then have to take any virtual objects and put them where they should be, and then I have to render any the user input, and I have to do that 30 times a second to make it look really good. The biggest thing is estimating where the camera is, and this is where, again, you get different types of AR. You can either do it by sensor-based, so you can use GPS, compass, phone accelerometers. Things like Wikitude does that, so the app you see, so it knows you're in space. The accuracy is pretty poor. You've got 10 meters, maybe 2 or 3 meters on a good day. So if you're trying to put somebody in front of a building, then it'll be okay. If you want to get down to accuracy, say in a gallery or in a museum where you want something to exist on a table, then you need other things, and that's where the vision ones comes in, and you use markers. Because you know what you're looking at for, then you can estimate where to put it, basically. There are a number of different ways. The old way we used these black and white things that look like barcodes. Now we can use preset ones, so it could be any image with a good texture. Or what we're doing is letting the user define some of their own markers. So what we want to do is let people replace their photographs and images at home with the images from the gallery. So you would look and suddenly all your pictures change to things out the gallery. You can use 3D objects, or what's coming in the future will be that your phone actually acts like a 3D scanner and scans the whole environment and automatically does this. But we'll need huge batteries on our phones by then, so it may be some way off. We've also looked at whether you do on device and in the cloud, and this is really interesting in terms of the artwork. If I make everything online on the device, I'm effectively loading all the artwork on this phone, and then if you know what you're doing, you could take it all off, and we're trying to use really high-res images, so there's a balance between what you store and what you give. So the artists don't want us to store all their images and then these go viral across the network. If you use the cloud for everything, the images, then you're essentially requiring a connection, and a really good one all the time. You can come with compromises in the between, so you only upload really low resolution ones at one time and pull off ones dynamically in the big. But it's a choice to be made. But it certainly has an effect in terms of the content, and that's something we found a lot with the work. In terms of when we've been doing trials, there's some really unexpected things you get with this. So this is one of the photographs that we've been using, and all these magnificent men with tremendous moustaches. And one of the things where we gave this spotlight image was that people started to look for the detail, and what we found is that on one of the faces of the young boy, there's actually a fingerprint, which if you pick up the photograph, you don't really notice. But being able to go in and zoom in and look at the actual detail of it, you get this sort of fine granularity of thing, and you can pick out these really weird things and see the brushstrokes on the work. In terms of where we're going next, so we're changing the interface, and we're letting the users define their own markers and setting up a small collection of 3 images that they can replace pictures in their home. And we start trials next week for schools for next week. So I've rushed through it that brilliantly. Yeah.